about reading difficulties, and then the next month in February we'll look in detail at difficulties with writing, and finally our last one will be all about memory and self-esteem and how to help children with both of those. Oops, sorry, I'm trying to make my mistake. There we go. So if you missed the first of the webinars, it was recorded. And if you use this link here, you can see not only the recording of past webinars, but you can also just find out about the future webinars as well. So that's quite a useful web page. And as far as registration is concerned, these are the people that registered. We had like 71 looking supporting children under 7, 140 between 7 and 11, but the bigger numbers tended to be 11 to 14 and over. And that makes sense because we're talking about exams. So you don't expect to see lots of people supporting primary age children because exams don't tend to be relevant, but it's never too early to set these learners up for success. So if you have got children under 7, it will still be relevant for you. And also, we ask people when they register to say whether they're educational professionals or parents, and then we kind of go into a bit more detail what sort of educational professional. So I think we normally get slightly more parents than educational professionals register, but it would be really helpful right now if those that are here, rather than those that registered, told me whether the age of the children that they support and whether they do so as a parent or educator or both. So if you just let me know that in the chat, it helps me tailor the evening more to the people that are here. But obviously, you notice, I will read those at the same time. I won't be too distracted. So you'll notice that we are aiming this at both parents and educators. And we are big believers in building really healthy working relationships, but a partnership between school and home. I think schools are under ridiculous pressure to increase targets, but they don't get any additional budget. And parents are a highly motivated, capable resource that want to help very often, but they need to be taught how. And I know from my own circumstances that my children wouldn't have done so well had I not been involved. And I know that to be the case for many other learners. So if you missed the first one, we're just going to do a real quick recap. And even if you were here for the first one, I've just cherry picked the most important slides that we looked at last time. And I'm going to go through them really, really quickly. So you're not at a disadvantage if either you haven't watched it or it was a month ago and a lot's happened and you can't remember. So we're just going to go through that really quickly. So I started off by telling you who sponsors this event. And it's a combination of Kingston University and the Driver Youth Trust. And we've started a new organisation, a collaboration called the KUDYT or QDIT. And our tagline is empowering educators by unlocking literacy to transform lives. And we absolutely believe that this is what we are doing. And the reason why it's so necessary that we do this is in the real world, in every last single classroom, we probably have 1 in 5 children struggling with literacy. And yet there is no mandatory training for teachers to be able to support this different type of learning. And as always, you'll see in the slides that I have these little links.
Sulla dislexia.
Oh, I think somebody's telling someone else about us. But yeah, I'll always put in links so you can find out more about whatever I say on the slides. So we have a typical classroom here, and the teaching styles that our teachers are taught when they train are effective for the majority. And they're really efficient. They expect children to read in order to learn and write to be assessed. And for 80% of the children, that works fine. And so it's a really good model. So it's very easy to think, if it doesn't work for just a minority, it's easy to think that the problem are the children that it doesn't work for. Whereas we would say, if a significant proportion of your children do not learn the way you teach, we need to learn to teach the way they learn. And that's what the KDIP project is all about. And we don't want children thinking that they are the problem. We want to realize teacher training needs to incorporate how to reach these learners, because it is a significant proportion of our learners. And these are the children that we really want to make a difference. We want to be able to help dyslexic children achieve. And the only way we're going to do this is if we help the whole infrastructure, that the 360 contact that they have. It's no good just having trainee teachers and early career teachers able to support dyslexic learners. We need existing classroom teachers, teaching assistants, SENCOs, parents, governors, and that's why we're having these webinars, to share the knowledge we have with as many people as possible. And we explained that last time. And we had a number of simulations, because we believe that the most effective way of supporting dyslexic learners is to understand how difficult school is for them. And we did this by having a number of simulations, so we as adults can understand how hard school is for students that struggle. And these are the simulations we did. We had a reading automaticity, working memory, visual memory, and writing automaticity. And these are very typical things that students struggle with. And it's really illuminating. And I find here at the university, both the students and staff find it really helpful to be put in the place of a dyslexic learner. And I think it makes them far more likely to be able to plan accordingly to make lessons inclusive. So obviously, if we are looking at the simulations, we are thinking about the typical dyslexic weaknesses. And these we went into a little bit more detail. And we said how these typical dyslexic weaknesses impact children in school every day. And that's because schools expect children to read in order to learn, to take notes in exams, which is cognitively very difficult when learning new information, and then write to be assessed. And if that wasn't bad enough, when it comes to exams, it's speed reading and having to write very quickly and recall information. So having to do things that dyslexics aren't very good at under time constraints, which makes it far more difficult. And so if we think about preparing for exams, so we prepare for exams here when we're revising, what do our students revise from? Well, they tend to revise from the textbooks, which internet, handouts that have to be read, the notes that they take in class, which they don't tend to take very good notes in class because it's not one of their strengths, and from their homework and coursework, which again, they don't tend to do as well at, so they're not set up for success in exams. And we looked at this quick timeline where we look at children from 4 to 18, their time in school, and we see that at the beginning, schools expect students to read in order to learn. They start off by learning to read. And then once they can read, they're expected to read in order to learn. So if they struggle with reading, they're at a disadvantage right throughout the curriculum. And then they need to write to be assessed. So if you struggle with writing, it never looks like you're very capable in a subject, when in actual fact, you're not very good at writing. So because of this, if we look over time, when we have the neurotypical and neuroatypical students starting together, they're about the same. You've got messy play, water play, carpet time. Everybody's doing really about the same. But as time goes on, and the emphasis comes more onto reading to learn and writing to be assessed, what happens is we see this attainment gap start to grow. And this is something that can be horribly damaging, because children aren't stupid. They compare themselves to their peers and they see that they're not able to achieve what their friends can easily. And they start to think, well, I'm not very clever, I'm stupid. But that isn't the case. And for educators amongst us, we're very familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, and that talks about lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. And if we look at that, the lower order thinking skills tend to be the dyslexic weaknesses, but the higher order skills tend to be the dyslexic strengths. So if our strengths as dyslexic are the higher order thinking skills, you would expect us to do well at school, but that is not the case. So that's the end of the recap. And how am I doing for time? Yeah, we're okay. So we've finished the recap. And so now I want to get on and talk about how to stop dyslexic learners underperforming in exams. And I'm going to start off by explaining why we want to dedicate a whole webinar to exams. And to do that, I'm going to look at some statistics. Now, I'm going to look at them very quickly, but I've included links in the slides so you can go and have a look in more detail. So the first statistics I want to look at came out in 2019 in an article in The Independent. And it basically said that the current exam system discriminates against dyslexic learners. And I totally agree that that is the case. And even though this was 2019, I genuinely think it hasn't changed. I hope it's changed. I hope it's improved a bit, but I don't think it has. So that is quite an interesting article to read, and I would recommend it. And then this is another article that, or other piece of research that went from 2018 to 2023. And sorry, I didn't actually point out the last piece of research in 2019 pointed out that when it came to GCSE English and maths, learners without special educational needs, 70.6% passed. That's grade 4 to 9. That's a pass in English and maths. But learners with dyslexia, only 35% passed. So half as many dyslexics passed as those without special educational needs. Now, every expert knows that dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence. So you would expect the number of learners, the learners with dyslexia to pass at exactly the same rate as learners without dyslexia. But that is not the case. So that's the research from 2019. So this research that went over a number of years says something very similar. And so in here we see the pupils that with SEND support. So these are the students that need SEND support, and the pupils with no SEND support. So they had no SEND support because they didn't need it because they weren't on a SEND register. And here we see percentage of pupils achieving grade 5 above in English and maths. And we see that again, the pupils with SEN every year is less than half. So less than half are achieving the same grades of GCSE English and maths. And we're talking about English and maths because they are super important. They are foundational qualifications that actually stop you being able to go on to further and higher education if you don't have GCSE English or GCSE maths at a pass level. Now, I'm not going to be able to help you with maths here this evening, but I am going to talk about GCSE English and other essay subjects. So we've looked at 2 studies. And now I'm just going to look at another article. This was one in the Teaching Times, and I'm just going to highlight again, I have a link there so you can find out more. But they stated there that in 2023, 64.2% passed to English language. And that didn't split off between students with dyslexia and students without, but if 64.2% passed, it means a third of the children that are taking GCSE English fail. And I don't think that should be the case. And I believe that if we use some of the techniques I'm going to show you this evening, I don't think it would be the case. And I just got the stat for this year, which is for summer 2024, 64.2 pass. So again, we have a third of children not passing basic English GCSE. And as a result of that, I truly believe that many gifted learners who are really talented do not meet the entry requirements that would get them onto the course where they would flourish and get into a career where their innate skills and talents would be used, because they just can't get those minimum entry requirements. And there are genuinely some careers that actually request dyslexic learners: architects, the intelligence service, graphic designers, anything creative really appreciate employing dyslexic learners. And it just seems so sad that because it's so hard to get those GCSEs, that they don't, if without them, it's really hard to get to university or get to into the course that they need to get to the career where they would succeed. Now, I'm really passionate about this because it affected me personally. And I hope you'll forgive me this mum bragging moment. This was this summer where I went to my son's graduation from his master's. Now, I am genuinely not putting this in to brag, although I am very proud of him. I put this in to give hope to parents and inspiration to educators. See, George is my middle child. All my children are wickedly dyslexic. They were all failing in school, but he is my most profoundly dyslexic child. And he really, even now, really struggles with reading, spelling, and writing. He is never, ever going to be strong at these. And he had a really hard time at school, right up to his GCSEs. And because I knew English GCSE was so incredibly important, I invested so much in getting him to pass English GCSE, and he passed the first time. He got a grade 4 after much work. Now, grade 4 is the lowest pass you can get, but we could not have been more delighted because we knew he would never, ever have to sit another essay exam for the rest of his life. And he went on to get 3 A stars at A level, a first class degree in pure maths. He's done an MSc in maths, and he's now just got a job very recently in as a quant trader. And he's really going to be able to use his dyslexic talent in that role. But genuinely, for a while, I wondered if he'd ever leave home, because if you can't read well and you can't write well, what on earth could he do? And it was only when I was able to start using some of the technology that I'm going to show you this evening that I started to see a change in him. And I know that a lot of children are not so lucky. A very good friend of mine's son took GCSE English 7 times. He passed it the 8th time. But that is, it's really challenging. What does that do to somebody's self-esteem, to have to wait to sort of do another resit and another resit? And while you're waiting, you're very limited in what you can do. And he was able to do bar work and work in cafes. But I really felt for him, because even though he went to a specialist dyslexia school, they didn't use technology. And I feel like they really miss a trip. And that's why I love doing these webinars, to try and spread the word to how incredibly transformative it can be when we utilize this technology. And I think you'll see what I'm talking about soon. But if I think of George's attainment gap, it was really evident. And I worked in the technology field. And so it was very natural for me to think, well, yeah, why not use tech? And I'd asked the school, and the school knew nothing about it, even though it was a fabulous, supportive dyslexia specialist school. They just weren't using technology. And at first, I was looking for tech that would help him learn to read and learn to spell. And it was good and it helped him. But I realized, no, I need to find the technology that's going to help him overcome those difficulties and succeed, even though he's probably never going to be great at reading and spelling, because I'm not great at reading or spelling and it hasn't held me back. So I wanted to do the same for him. So I went in search of technology that would help him overcome his weaknesses. And I was absolutely delighted with what I found. So much so that when the time came when all my children were doing great and they were absolutely fine, they didn't need me anymore. I decided I couldn't go back to the tech world, but I needed to share this in the education world. Hence, I'm working as a lecturer here at Kingston University. So the technology really can reduce the attainment gap. It is not a cure-all. It's easy to think, well, if I invest money in this, then my child will be okay, or my students will be okay. To invest in the technology is not enough. We need to know how to use it effectively. But I'm not the only person that thinks we should be using technology to narrow the attainment gap. The JCQ, which is the Joint Council of Qualifications, which is the umbrella body that oversees all the exam boards, they came out with this statement in 2020. And I very, very, very rarely read a slide, but this one I think is super, super encouraging. It says Senkos may wish to consider the use of technology to a much greater extent instead of readers and scribes. Computer readers, examination pens, speech recognition technology, and word processors not only allow candidates to work independently, but are also a better preparation for further and higher education and the world of employment. So the JCQ said that back in 2020. And I'm not going to actually, I realized right now you don't necessarily know what those are. You don't know what a computer reader is. You don't know what an examination pen is, but you will. I am going to show you those. And for the educators amongst you, I'm just going to show you, I've included some information from the JCQ along with links to help you get more information. So this is just something generic saying that for people with learning difficulties like dyslexia, you can have a computer reader and you can use a word processor. And then just going into a little bit more detail as to how you can use these and why both the computer reader and the word processor. Now, I was hoping I got in touch with the JCQ because I started doing this work with the technology I'm going to show you back in 2020. 4 years on, I was hoping to have some incredible stats for you and say, yeah, since then, these are the numbers of students that have been using it. But unfortunately, the JCQ don't keep those statistics. So they sent me to Ofqual, and Ofqual were able to give me this information. So they were telling me in the thousands the number of approved access arrangements for 25% extra time. And then I saw that the computer reader was considerably less. Now, knowing what I do, I'm really surprised that there aren't more schools taking up the use of a computer reader. And if you're a school here that's not using it, I'm absolutely not trying to make you feel bad. You are in the majority. But what I want to do is show you the benefits if you use a computer reader, because I know schools are spread very thin, trying to raise attainment for all. And sometimes it's hard to put your head above the parapet and do the research necessary to work out what can be beneficial. So I feel like I do the research to save schools that burden. So let me go on and show you now what it is I'm talking about. Oh, sorry, there's just a few more stats there from Ofqual, but again, I put a link in so you can do it. So let's just see what do we need to do at round 16 when students are taking essay-based exams. So we're going to start off by looking at what to do in GCSEs and A-levels, and then we're going to work backwards to say, okay, in order for to be successful here, what needs to be in place further down the school? But before I do, I want to remind you what an exam room looks like, because if you're like me, it's probably been a long time since you were in an exam room. Now, every student has their own desk. They are far away from somebody else, so we can't see each other's work. We can't copy each other's work. It's silenced. We have an invigilator or two walking around to check that nothing untoward is happening. So that's what an exam room looks like, and it's important to keep that in mind. And I'm going to give an example of English language GCSE, but what I'm telling you is true kind of for any exam, essay-based exam. So what the winning combination is, and these are two words that were in that JCQ statement, is a computer reader and a word processor. So what does that mean? Well, a computer reader means you can have the exam read to you using text-to-speech technology. And that can be done in a number of ways, one of which is an exam pen. So this is an exam pen. So that's just one way of doing it. So let me show you what a computer reader can do. In order to answer just one single question in this English GCSE, the student needs to read all this information. And if they have a human reader sits next to the student and they read the exam paper for them. Now, a human reader in English language GCSE can read this part, which is telling you, the number of sections in the exam, how long you have for each one, where you need to write the answers. So they can read this information and they can read the question, but they cannot read any of the comprehension text. And that's right, because English language GCSE is a test of English comprehension. And if the human reader were to read it for the students, it would maybe be measuring their comprehension rather than the students or the candidates. But if they use a computer reader, that computer reader can read all of that information. So everything that the human reader could read and the insert paper. And that can make an absolutely huge difference to a child. And we're going to talk about why, but let's think about that exam room and think about what a huge difference that makes to the school. Because in a school, you have a big exam hall. And then if you have a human reader, for every last single child that needs a human reader, you need a separate area. Because if the human reader is reading to the child, it's going to disturb everyone around them. So there needs to be some sort of sound barrier. And that makes the logistics for exam day really onerous. Plus, you've got to pay the person to be the reader. And sometimes they need to be knowledgeable in the subject, because once you start getting into A levels, maybe doing science, there's certain vocabulary that could be quite tricky. And so it's hard to employ these people. They're only needed for a short time. The building needs to have lots more rooms. It's a logistical nightmare. But if you have a computer reader, you can have many children in exactly the same room, all just wearing headphones. And if they're wearing headphones, they're not disturbing anybody else. And it really reduces the logistical nightmare and the cost. Now, there is a cost involved in using a computer reader, but I would suggest that that will pay for itself very, very quickly. So let me demonstrate a computer reader to you. And here we go. This is the exam paper that I showed you earlier. And we see here that this is the insert. This is the English comprehension text. And what I can do with a computer reader is I can highlight what I want to read. And then, let me highlight what I want to read and then press play.
Using a time machine, an organization called Time Safari transports clients into the past to take part in hunting expeditions.
Right, probably enough of that. But if you are a student who knows you don't read quickly, sometimes you read what's not there, you make mistakes. How anxious do you feel going into your English language GCSE, knowing that if you don't pass it, you can't get to university? It is not a good learning environment. It's not where you're going to do your best. But if you know you could have the question read aloud to you and you could read that one question or one insert as many times as you needed to in order to gain understanding of the question, how much more confident would you feel doing that exam? So that is just one computer reader. But there are lots of others, and I'm in equal opportunity. So this is another, this would be a cheaper form of reader. And here we see yet another, a competitor of the product that I just showed you. But there are lots of different computer readers, and the child will use it for their mock exams, their end of 10. Can the speed of the speech? Yes, it can. I actually read that one. I don't normally read them, but yes, it can. And this is, you sort of set me up. This is where you would change the speed and you can change the voice. But it's important that the candidates aren't using this for the first time in their GCSEs or their A levels, but they're using it in all their mocks and all their end of year exams. So they're very, very comfortable using it. It needs to be their normal way of working. So that's a computer reader. Now I'm going to show you the word processor. Now, a word processor basically means you type rather than handwrite your exams. And let me show you what a difference that can make to results. And I'm going to talk about English language GCSE, and both AQA and OCR, two of the examining bodies, both have two papers for English. Each one is 1 hour and 45 minutes long, total of 3.5 hours. But most of the students that I work with get 25% extra time, which basically means a total time in an English exam of 4 hours and 20 minutes. And you're not writing the whole time, you are reading the paper and you are planning your answers. So I think you could conservatively say of that 4 hours and 20 minutes, students will probably be writing for 3.5 hours in total. So let's see, writing for 3.5 hours, what impact does good typing skills have on the results? Now, I've made lots of assumptions here, and if we had more time, I would talk you through them. But bear with me, and I have got a video that explains this in a lot more detail. So here we have, if you are handwriting, a typical handwriting speed for a 16-year-old would be 19 words per minute. That's just a typical 16-year-old, not somebody that has any issues. Some can write really fast, maybe 29 words a minute, maybe more. Some will be very slow, maybe 9, 10, 12 words a minute. So 19 is a real average for a typical 16-year-old. So for 3.5 hours, if you're writing 19 words a minute, you will write 266 sentences in 3.5 hours. If you're a kind of okay typist, you've taught yourself, and you tend to have a barrier where you plateau about 29 words per minute when you do it yourself. That means in 3.5 hours, you could write 406 sentences, which is considerably more. Now, it's not a magic wand, because if you haven't got the information in your head, if you haven't revised, it's useless. But so many of the students I work with just run out of time, and they have all this information they've revised, but they just can't get it down. Maybe they've got a poor pencil grip, but they just cannot get it down. And the time runs out and they still have so much more they could write. But if they really invest in typing, a 16-year-old can type about 50 words a minute. I have a lot of my students that can do 70, 80. but I have others that can only do 30, 40. So 50 is a good average for someone that's invested some time to become a good typist. And we see then the difference in the number of sentences that you can write. Now, I don't know in English language or in RS or English literature, what's the potential of a mark for one sentence? But even if it was only a quarter of a mark for each sentence, you're going to improve your grade significantly if you can type. And there are lots of other advantages for typing, but there is a YouTube channel that explains in detail how I came up with these figures if you want to go into that in more detail. But speed is not the only advantage with typing. Brains like mine, these non-neurotypical brains, I have ADHD and dyslexia. When I see an exam paper or an exam question, I'm not normally thinking, oh, I haven't got a clue. I'm normally thinking, oh my goodness, I must say that, I must say that, I mustn't forget this. And my thoughts are like helium balloons that kind of go off. And yeah, and as much as you should sit and plan, you get so excited and you want desperately to start writing. But when you type, it's an absolute gift for your lateral thinkers, your non-linear thinkers, because you can just put some ideas down and then reorganize them. You see, cut and paste is a gift for non-linear thinkers. And what you're able to do is you're able to brainstorm your ideas and then organize them. And you can think, okay, what's the question asking? Okay, this information would make a good introduction, and this would make a logical next point, and this would be the logical point after that, and then this will be my conclusion. And you can reorganize it. And if a candidate is anything like me, they'll probably go on and do another 3 questions and think, oh, I should have included that in the first one. When you type, you can go back and you can do that. The other lovely advantage of touch typing for dyslexics is you are able to you can copy spellings. I'm not saying this very well, but here you see the word Tyrannosaurus Rex is in the exam paper spelt correctly. And if you're then writing that over and over again in your answer and you spell it 3 or 4 different ways, you're going to lose some spag marks, some spelling and grammar marks. But if you're typing and touch typing, what I'm able to do, and I'm a rubbish speller, is I don't have to take my eyes off the exam paper with the correct spelling onto the keyboard and then go back to the exam paper and then back to the keyboard, which slows down quick typists. I'm able to copy spellings without slowing down. So that's another great advantage of touch typing. But many students often say to me, but why can't I just look at the keyboard? And what I normally say is, if you are a good speller, then yes, look at the keyboard. Don't bother to touch type. Although if you want to be really, really fast, you do need to touch type. But I know many students that can type 40 words a minute who don't touch type, and that's fine if you're a good speller. But if you need to stop to copy spelling, you're far better off learning to touch type. So I will go back and reiterate the winning combination for essay-based exams is a computer reader and a word processor. Why? Well, the computer reader will improve the confidence, and that's a big thing. It enables the student to read the questions over and over again, so they're less likely to go off on a tangent and write a lot of correct information that doesn't answer the question, because that's what you do when you panic. You tend to think, oh, it says this, and you go off on a tangent. So they're less likely to misunderstand the question. And with the word processor, you're writing, well, it's not writing, what you hand in is legible. As long as you've learnt to type, it's faster. You can copy correct spellings, and you can reorganize your ideas, which is great if you're not a linear thinker. So that's why it is the winning combination. So who's allowed to do that? What evidence is required by the JCQ? This is really important. It basically says here that the Asenka, it needs to reflect the candidate's current and normal way of working in order to use a computer reader. And for the word processor, it needs to be the candidate's normal way of working. Now, that's a word processor without any spell check, without any help at all. They don't even use Word, they just use Notepad. But they are able to type as opposed to write. And the way it goes is it needs to be your normal way of working. So you need to have some sort of cognitive difficulty that requires this to be your normal way of working. But other than that, that is the burden of evidence. So what needs to be in place if we want our 16-year-olds to be proficient and capable of using computer readers and being a laptop reader when they're 16? Well, I would say if we want them to use a computer reader and word processor, let's think first of all about using a word processor. It needs to be the normal way of working. So how do you ensure that it's the normal way of working? Well, I would suggest students learn to type before they go to secondary school, because they enter secondary school then with typing as their normal way of working. And then throughout secondary school, they can learn the tips and techniques of using typing to produce a good quality, legible, easy to read piece of work. Now, learning to type at this age is not great from a dexterity point of view. You're far better waiting till about here from a dexterity point of view. But by this time, well, we'll go into that later, but once students have started doing their GCSE courses, they need to spend all their time learning biology, history, maths. They don't have time to learn to touch type. And then the burden of evidence for typing as being your normal way of working is far more difficult. It's far more onerous and time consuming for the school, which is why I think you're far better off learning early, starting secondary school with typing as your normal way of working. Now, for younger students, I don't agree with pushing students to type too early. I think it can backfire, because then they have this really, if they don't have the dexterity, if they don't have the maturity, they're like, well, why can't I use any finger I want? I hate this. When they could come back and learn to type because they have the dexterity and the maturity, they have a very negative association, so they just don't want to do it. So I don't agree with starting any earlier than 10, although I have had incredible success with 8 and 9-year-olds. You're not guaranteed that young. I think 10 is an early age to start. So then, if a child is too young, dictation is a fabulous way of helping children that find writing difficult, be it because they have hand pain or pencil grip, or be it because they just suffer with blank page syndrome and they just can't fill that empty page. And then if you ask them just to say what they would like to put on the page, they find it much easier. So I teach much younger children to dictate and then move on to typing. But also the students that come to me 10, 15 on, whenever they come to me to learn to type, I then teach them dictation, because dictation is a fabulous skill to learn, but I always teach it after I've taught them to touch type, because it's so much easier than touch typing. Learning to touch type is hard. And it's so much easier to dictate that they won't put in the time and effort it needs to get good at typing. And typing is a relatively easy access arrangement to get. To dictate in exams is really, really hard access arrangement to get. The burden of evidence is much, much, much greater. And if you think about it, the logistics would be a nightmare, because you've got that great big exam hall, you can't all be saying the answers because everyone would hear it. And so everyone would always need to be in a very, very separate room because we don't want people copying their answers. So dictation is great, but I don't want my teenagers to get so dependent on it that then when it comes to exams, they're really in a bad state because they can't dictate in exams. It's far better to learn to type. So that's taken what needs to happen earlier in school for being a word processor user in exams. But now when it becomes a computer reader, you can have electronic textbooks read aloud to you. And a lot of people don't know that. And when we have the next webinar, I'll show you what I mean by that. So that's electronic textbooks and notes being read aloud. You can have the web read aloud. You can have Word documents read aloud, PowerPoint read aloud. They all use something called text to speech. And every bit of text on a screen can be read aloud, but how depends on what the text is and the device that you're reading it on. But there is always an option, and that's what we'll talk about in the next webinar. What, have I gone the wrong way? Yes, I've gone the wrong way. And also, if you are going to be listening here to your chemistry revision booklet, or you're going to learn biology or RS by listening to textbooks, you're at an advantage in doing so if you've got accustomed to taking in information audibly. So if you've gotten used to listening to audiobooks, so you've listened to Stephen Fry reading Harry Potter, and you've kept up with the plot and you know what's happening, you're in a far better position to be able to concentrate later on. So it's really good to introduce audiobooks early. And also I will be explaining immersive reading, which is a cross between an audiobook and an electronic book. And it's been proven to really help reluctant readers read far more for pleasure, which is an excellent thing. And also, there's great technology to actually teach children how to read, so how to read. And that's great. My children really loved it. So if you're starting to use technology to learn at 4 and 5, it's a natural progression to go on and listen to textbooks later and then listen to your exams. So that is what I think needs to be in place further down the school. But technology is not a magic wand. It's very important that children are taught how to use it effectively. They also need to be taught how to learn. A lot of schools are very good at teaching biology and history and maths, but some of our students need explicit teaching of what does learning mean? What does it look like? How do you do it? And that's something I love doing because I love seeing the light bulb go on when they realize, that's how you do it. And also we need to explicitly teach people how to revise. But probably most importantly is we need to always work on our child's self-belief and self-esteem, because it doesn't matter how many great strategies or technologies you put in place, if they believe they're not capable, then they won't put in the effort it takes to use the technology or to learn the new strategy because they've given up. And I have been in that situation many times. So it's always important to start with self-esteem, which is why we will talk about that in one of the webinars. So why it's vital to start using tech early? Well, if we look at our timeline again, and this is just something I've put together from anecdotal evidence, I find the pressure of work increases as you go up the school. Your peer pressure increases as you go up the school, and how cooperative children are goes down as they go through the school. And then it peaks again as they get a little bit older. But on the whole, I have worked with way too many children around this age where I get involved and I know that they're capable and I know that I could teach them the strategies and the technology that would help them achieve in exams. And they've already given up. They've already said, I just want to be like my friends. I don't want to use a computer in exams. No, I'm not going to type. I just want to be like my friends. I'm not expecting to get any decent GCSEs. I don't care. And that breaks my heart. And that's why it's really important to start early. So I'm just coming to an end now. These are the rest of the webinars. We're going to learn about reading, writing, memory, and self-esteem. And they're all the precursors. So our students are set up for success in exams. And we have 67 people here tonight. I hope you agree with me that more than 67 people could probably benefit, which is why we record it. But I really would ask you to just share if you think this has been useful with your colleagues at school, or if you're a parent with the school, just maybe share the video because we want to get more educators involved so we can really help more students achieve what they're capable of. This next QR code will you can use to book on to the next webinar should you want to do that. But now I am totally open for any questions you might have, but I will keep the share going in case you want that QR code. Do anybody, I would be grateful if you would just speak the questions, because I'm not really in a position to read them all.
Caroline, there are a couple of questions pop up while you're presenting and asking around the computer reader.
Yeah.
There's a question saying, like, can you have all of these adjustments in an exam, like reader, word processor, and extra time?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
And there are a couple of questions covering like the speed of the computer reader, considering the readout speed is a little bit quick. Is it possible to slow
Do you
it
know
down?
what? Yeah, I did show that you can slow down. I'd slowed that down. As somebody with ADHD who uses text to speech every day of her life, I have it so fast because I hate it, bores me. I'll lose concentration. So I have it really fast. So I slowed it down for the demo, but I obviously didn't slow it down enough.
Let me see.
But if anyone wants to shout out so Natalie hasn't got to read them all, I'm very happy for you to do so.
Oh, hi there. Not sure if you can hear me. I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it was about the could you explain a bit about the exam pen and some more about immersive readers as well, please?
Well, immersive readers will be on the next one. Immersive readers are a bigger topic than I can talk about now. But this exam pen, it's much cheaper to buy than a laptop. And what it does is it's just a portable scanner. And the orange one is an exam pen. The white one is it's just called a reading pen, and it has a dictionary inbuilt, but you can't use it in exams. So what happens here is you scan. Now, a student has to be taught how to use it, and they I think they might even let you have them on a short-term basis to check that children get on with it. Not all children get on with it, but if they kind of just go along like that, and then they can hear it being said to them. So that's what an exam pen does. Does that answer your question?
Oh, right. So they just have like some kind of headphones in
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then wipe the pen over the text. Right. Sorry.
Yeah.
I can't see very well. I've got a little screen on my phone. I should have gone on the laptop. Sorry.
No worries. I can see one. What program do you use to teach typing, Caroline? Really good question. I did a lot of research about 5 years ago, and I paid a lot of different students to learn to type, and I used lots of different packages. And while there are preferences, I think what matters is the supervision and the motivation. That's what matters. And if you can get them motivated, which is what I spend a lot of time trying to do, and you make sure they're well supervised and you incentivize them, That's what matters. Now, some of them did have preferences. I have preferences as a teacher. I like the ones that have the best reporting, because if it has really good reporting, then I'm able to keep them on track. But on the whole, if I didn't need the reporting, I really like English type. But you have to pay for English type. It's not very expensive. But if you're a school, then it depends on the age of the child. And there are lots of pros and cons of each. I hope that helps a bit.
Caroline, can I just ask you quickly? It was a pleasure
Yes.
to hear you take us through this.
Hi, Jan. Jan and I used to work together many years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm really impressed with what you're doing here. And just a quick one, recordings. And maybe I missed that. When will where will the recordings be made available?
You'll be emailed a link in the near future. And then if you miss that, or for people that just find out about them later, we have the KUDYT webinar webpage, and all past recordings will be on there. Basically, we'll probably be sending you a link to that, and that's where you get them.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Lovely to see you.
Yeah,
I can see Jason, you've got a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Because I couldn't see the word processor clearly, because I only got the small screen up on the screen. Is that the same as the infamous C pen that used to be around, or is that different to a C pen?
Word processor just means typing. It's a laptop or a computer that the school have configured to be for exams. So you can't bring in your own laptop, because you could go on the internet and you know, you'd be at an unfair advantage. So schools have to have dedicated exam laptops. That's what I mean by a word processor. When it comes to computer reader,
That's the one that I probably got
option.
mixed up with. Sorry.
Yeah, a computer reader, this is one option, but then I also showed text help and Claro. There's lots of different options for computer readers. When it comes to every day doing homework, reading the web, reading textbooks, you can do all of that for free. When it comes to reading in exams, you have to pay for something, because of the way, the architecture of how they work. You've got to make sure that it's secure, and the machine the children cannot get onto the internet and cheat in any way.
Okay, just last one. Has anybody actually used the C pen that used to advertise quite a lot?
I mean, they sell thousands.
Okay, just wanted to know if it was any good or any.
My son's got one.
They are. It's like Marmite.
Yep.
Some people love them, some people hate them. I personally, because I don't think just having a computer reader is enough. I think you need a computer reader and you need a laptop and type. Well, if you've got a laptop, put a computer reader on the laptop, then you haven't got to use a pen. But if you're in a circumstance where you can't use a laptop for any reason, so maybe earlier down in the school, there's no option of a laptop, then your pen is a godsend, because you can't use a laptop anyway. But if I could use a laptop, I would use that instead. And did you see me using the computer reader when I read out the text for the GCSE?
I may have missed that bit.
Well, I would just go back and watch the recording.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Any other questions?
Caroline, it's Betsy Vernon here. I just
Hello.
wanted to know. Hello. Thank you very much for the last one that you did and tonight's. You said they're sort of freely available, the recordings afterwards. So could that be like part of a department update, or there's no copyright on it or anything?
No, goodness, I never put copyright on anything. I am an evangelist for this stuff. I just want as many people to benefit as possible. You can do anything you want with it. I'd just be delighted that you did, Betsy.
Lovely. Thank you very much. and
You're
look
very
forward to the next
welcome.
one.
Brilliant.
All right, bye then.
Bye-bye. I can see a hand up, but I can only see IO. So IO, go
Hello.
for it.
Hi,
Hello.
my child has a reader pen. Excuse me, my child has a reader pen and she has got one that's provided by the school and I got her one as well. So I just thought I'd give a little feedback from that point of view.
Oh, yeah.
And I would say it's good. In theory, it's great. But you know how when you speak to Siri on your phone, Siri makes really silly mistakes, like sends you to Newcastle instead of sending you to New York or something. It's like that. It makes really crazy mistakes. And for someone who's dyslexic, they can't necessarily, my child can't necessarily understand that that's a mistake.
Mistake,
That's
right.
one thing. It is just really ridiculous mistakes. And the other thing I was just going to ask you is, I know you said that if you had somebody reading out the actual text passage in the English language exam, then you're kind of testing whether they understand it rather than the student. But I'm not sure if I totally understand what you mean, because, you know, if I'm reading something to my child, it's, or if they're listening to an audiobook, sorry, it's definitely that they are either understanding or not, if you know what I mean.
Well,
And I just think
it's not my opinion. It's
okay.
It's basically what the exam board says, and I can kind of understand it. So the exam board says it's not classed as independent learning if it's read to you. But by the time you get into GCSEs, you can use a laptop anyway. How old's your child that's got the reader pen?
So 15 in the GCSE year now.
Oh, in which case I would 100% be going for a computer laptop user.
Okay.
Because
So
I find this is when you're too young for a laptop.
Right. Sorry, did you say when you're too young for a laptop?
But yeah. Because if
so
you
you would
think
use
about
the
what I
reader
showed,
pen for much younger age.
yeah.
Okay. Right. That's interesting because it's what the school really provided. So I kind of copied what they were doing so that we've got the access.
And that's great. It's definitely, maybe they don't have enough money for laptops.
Well, they do provide laptops sometimes, but she's very reluctant to touch type. So that means that, you know, it's kind of like a struggle to use a laptop.
Yeah. And that is a real sort of validating what I said about starting very early, because once you get to 15, if they don't want to, they don't want to. There's not a lot you can do. You can bribe, you can do it. And I have had reluctant people that I've managed to turn around. But I'm saying all that, now I've got this new role. I'm not teaching it anymore, well, not for the foreseeable future. But anyway, there are very good touch typing teachers out there.
Yeah, I did want to add how I'm really grateful for your presentation, and thank you for making it no faff and all this and like no waffle. It's been great.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm really grateful. You know what? It might probably be helpful if anyone does have nice comments like that. If you put them in the chat, we can use it to promote it the next time. Because obviously we're not doing that great at promoting. So if you can do that, we would love to use your comments to promote to other people in the new year. Any other questions? Well, that's probably a good place to stop, because they do like to lock up the university about this time, and I don't want to get locked in. But thank you so much for your attention, and anything you can do to promote these to others, we would be incredibly grateful. So thank you so much for your attention. Have a great Christmas, and we will see you in the new year. Bye-bye.